All right, welcome back. We're on location this morning in Raleigh. It's live at the legislature on Talk of the Town on 103.7 and 94.1. Good to have everybody back with us this morning. We are up here trying to take a deeper look at how the sausage is made up here on Jones Street. That's what we're doing. And we got a great guest coming up. Senator Phil Berger's here at the Daily Planet Cafe with us. Let me thank our sponsors once again for being with us this morning. Thanks to everyone who stepped up and sponsored our show today, including Potash Corp Aurora, the Overton Group, Sam Jones Barbecue, Culpeper Investments, Wells Fargo Advisors, Greenville Auto World, and the North Carolina Hospital Association. And at 19 now, in front of 8 o'clock, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, Senator Phil Berger, joins us live this morning in the Daily Planet Cafe. Senator, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Henry. I'm
good
fine.
to see you. Thank you for walking across the street. I know a lot is going on in that building across the street from us this morning.
It's a busy beehive right now.
You and I had a chance to visit a little bit earlier this week, and I know that with the short session, you're hoping to get out of here shortly. but things keep coming up, don't they?
They do, and they always will. The key thing for us is once we can get the budget done, even though things will continue to come up, they generally are not things that we absolutely have to do. The budget itself is something that has to be completed. Generally try to get it finished before the end of the fiscal year, which is June the 30th. Hopefully we'll meet that deadline.
The short session is generally considered to be a session with regard to the budget, for the state budget, that it's a tweaking year, right? It's supposed to be tweaking, but it seems like as we've moved down the continuum here, it gets a little more involved than that on a year-to-year basis.
Well, that's the way the short session started, was
Yeah.
a budget adjustment session. And I believe it was in the late 60s or 70s when that started. And every year, as the state's grown, more issues have come up, and so the short session has really been, as a practical matter, something that can take up just about anything.
The big thing, of course, that we keep talking about year after year when it comes to the state budget is school teacher salaries and state employee salaries and things like that. I thought it was interesting yesterday. Some of the statistics, I don't know, maybe some people don't get the media or only read the parts of the media that they don't really that they want to read, but we've had the fastest growth and largest increases in teacher salaries in North Carolina in the last 3 years. And
in the country.
Yeah, in the country.
In the country.
And yet you've got people from the North Carolina Association of Educators, or I guess it was an offshoot group yesterday, protesting here in Raleigh, just up the street, blocking traffic. And I'm going to talk to Governor McCrory about this in just a few minutes when he joins us. And the staff had agreed to meet with him. But I mean, it just proves once again that, you know, there's this attitude against, I think, the Republican leadership of the state, that no matter what you do, you're going to get that kind of kickback from the lefties.
Sure, and you know, you have to view it in the context that some of these groups, most of them that are protesting, are Democratic groups. They are there because they support the Democrats and they support liberal policies, and so they're going to be opposed to just about everything that we do, because they're trying to create a narrative that that there is opposition to the direction we're going in. I will tell you that the results of elections don't bear that out.
The governor's budget, when the governor made his budget proposal, he wanted school teachers to be at an average of 50,000 or higher. The House then made their proposal. You came back, and the Senate proposal was actually the highest of the three. Where does that stand, and where do you think we'll end up this year with school teacher salary? Because I know they're actually over there talking about that right now.
They are, and we don't know for sure, but certainly one thing we can say with full assurance is that the teachers will continue the progress that we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years. And really, Henry, that progress has been enabled by virtue of the fact that we've done some things that the Democrats never could do, and that is control the growth of spending overall in the state budget, reduce taxes so that the private sector would have an opportunity to grow and prosper. And the result of that has been that our budgets are balanced. Our budget growth is consistent with population growth and inflation. And our revenues actually are ahead of what projections were, because the economy has been picking up over the state. A lot of that because of those policies we've adopted. And that's given us the capacity to do some things with reference to teacher pay.
Well, I often say that, you know, without conservative talk radio, you guys don't even have a voice. So let me say it once again to you and the rest of the leadership here in Raleigh. You know, we appreciate what you've done. I mean, if you look at the economy of North Carolina, it's been on fire for the last year, and that's no mistake. I mean, people who don't understand that less government spending actually spurns the private sector, they just don't get it.
Well, you leave money in people's pockets. They will do something with it, and most of the time, what they will do will be helpful to the economy. You give the money to government, they'll do something with it, and a lot of times what they do is harmful to the economy.
Right. Speaking of that, there was a proposal yesterday. There was some discussion about the possibility of capping income tax. Actually putting in a vote on capping income tax at 5.5%, which I assume would that take a constitutional amendment, or?
Henry, I didn't know this, and I dare say most people didn't know this or don't know this, but we currently have a income tax cap in our Constitution, 10%. And so
that's a little high.
Well, it's a little high. And so our thinking is that we are already on track for next year for the individual income tax rate to be 5.499. And our thought was, well, let's lock that in as the maximum, or under the maximum rate constitutionally. That way, we'll be in better shape in terms of controlling the growth of state spending, because the income tax, two things. One, it does generate a good bit of money in good times, but secondly, the higher you make the income tax, really the more of a throttle you have on the overall economy.
Sure.
So if we can reduce that cap, I think it'd be good for North Carolina long term.
But it sounds like the decision, I know that Senator Apodaca, who runs the Rules Committee, basically tabled that and said we're not going to deal with that this year. Is that right?
Well, I think it's possible that we will see that coupled with some other items. We sent a bill over to the House last year during the long session for a constitutional amendment that would not only cap the income tax, but would also provide some throttle on the growth of spending by state government, and would dedicate some of the excess revenues to the rainy day fund and keep the rainy day fund in a healthy situation. So that amendment actually is still there. It's already been passed by the Senate in another form, and we are hoping our colleagues in the House will act on it.
If you're just joining us, we're live at the legislature this morning, right across the street in the Daily Planet Cafe here on Jones Street in Raleigh. Senator Phil Berger, who is the President Pro Tem of the North Carolina Senate, our guest here this morning. Before we leave the budget, is there anything else in the budget that you'd like to comment on that maybe that I haven't asked you? I know school teacher salaries, taxes, all of that, that's always the big news in the North Carolina budget. Is there anything else that's a particular interest of yours in this budget?
Well, several things on the budget. I tend to be more concerned about the overall situation. So the growth number, the percentage growth of spending is below 3%, which I think is extremely healthy for us. We also provide full funding for the university system, the community colleges. Those are there. We have at least the remainder of what I thought was an excellent proposal to try to deal with some issues with the cost of education. So the $500 tuition is still in for UNC Pembroke, and also still in for Western Carolina, which I think will be a huge a huge benefit to those campuses, but also a benefit to moms and dads and students who have to pay tuition. They will now have a choice of going to a fine UNC institution at a very reasonable cost.
Of course, that's very near and dear to our hearts. Elizabeth City State's in our listening area. East Carolina's in our listening area. And so let me ask you about that since you brought it up. The original proposal included 3 other universities other than Pembroke and Western Carolina. It also included Elizabeth City State, Winston-Salem State, and Fayetteville State. You know, it's no secret that Elizabeth City State has had its problems and is struggling financially right now. And I know that, you know, you and I talked about this earlier this week. I've talked to Senator Apodaca. The kickback from the alumni in those schools was unconscionable, in my opinion. I mean, that's just my opinion. And I have to be careful what I say here. I'm on the Board of Governors, but the Board of Governors fully supports that idea. And I would say that with Elizabeth City in mind, we would just like to say from the eastern part of the state, anything you can do to help Elizabeth City State become more financially viable, we really need your help on that.
Well, the program, I think, would have done that. It would have provided very reasonable tuition, not only for in-state students, but for out-of-state students. And Elizabeth City State, where it is, its proximity to the Tidewater area in Virginia, I think it really could have increased the number of applicants and just the fiscal viability of that campus. I was quite frankly surprised at the negative reaction from the alums and in many instances from some of the staffs at those institutions. And
but not from Elizabeth City.
But we continue to understand that there's a responsibility to make sure that all of our campuses are fiscally viable. And we'll just have to take a look at what we need to do.
Actually, what I said is not true, because there were some alums from Elizabeth City who made some really, I thought, not very smart comments and probably uninformed comments. You know, so it's comments
I would say definitely uninformed.
Yeah, basically comments like, you know, leave Elizabeth City State alone. We'll make it on our own. Well, that's not happening, and it's not going to happen. But I will say that Dr. Thomas Conway, the new university chancellor at Elizabeth City, who is awesome, is fully supportive of this. And so we hope that you'll, you know, when we were leaving the other day, we met with Senator Apodaca again, and it sounded like there might be a crack in the door. So we're still hopeful that Elizabeth City will get a second look at that. But we'll see how that turns out. Of course, it's still got to go through the House.
That's correct.
How would that be funded, by the way? I know the House is already saying, well, we don't know where the money's coming from. Where is the money coming from?
Well, the money would come from basically general revenues. The proposal had actually written into the proposal a mandatory use of a particular line item in the continuation budget that would have funded that additional money.
I think it's a great idea. I applaud you and Senator Apodaca for coming up with that, and I hope that it can somehow find its way into the budget. But I know there's a lot of other things to be concerned about as well. Well, you've been kind to give us 15 minutes. Anything else on your mind that you want to mention for this legislative session?
No, and this is not for this legislative session, but I would echo your remarks about conservative talk radio. One of the reasons that our message does get out is because of the various stations that carry shows like this all across the state. And people listen every day, and people understand a lot of what we're doing, more so than what they get from the major newspapers.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. One last thing. I didn't ask you about the Brody School of Medicine, and I know I'll be screamed at back in Greenville if I don't. And we've talked about this privately, but the Brody School of Medicine continues to be the answer, I think, for doctors in the state of North Carolina. We're going to have a doctor shortage coming. The funding model for that thing has struggled a little bit of late. It does not own a hospital. So we appreciate your past support of the Brody School of Medicine as well, and we appreciate you understanding how important that is, not only to North Carolina as a whole for producing the doctors in the state, but also to the economy of Greenville and eastern North Carolina.
Well, our members understand the importance of East Carolina and the medical school to the economic health of eastern North Carolina and to the physical health of eastern North Carolina.
Good to see you, Senator.
You too.
Thank you for coming. Senator Phil Berger here live this morning at the legislature in Raleigh at the